Okay, thank you and welcome everybody, and good to be with you. I know this is a new thing, a new way to do conferences, but in some ways it's better because you get to do it from home, the comfort of home, and sometimes it makes it easier to listen as well. So we'll get through this today, and hopefully you'll learn something a little different than what you've heard thus far. Um, because the very topic, the very title of our workshop today is Psychology, Religion, and Spirituality in the Age of COVID. And so I'm going to talk about that very topic and how we can be more aware as therapists about what our spiritual needs might be of the clients that we work with. So you heard a little bit about my background. So I am both a psychologist and a priest. And I'll tell you in a minute a little bit about how that came to be and how it fits into what I do and why I think it's important. So we're going to start off with a very interesting fact here, that statistically most of the patients that we work with and treat in this country consider themselves to be persons of faith, to have a belief system in a higher power, and to even consider themselves religious. But most therapists, statistically, do not claim to be religious or claim to have a spiritual belief. Now, do you think that might pose a problem with clients we might be working with? That people with one mindset are working with people with perhaps a different mindset? Well, I do think sometimes it can be a problem, but let me shed some light on why that is today. In light of this pandemic, we're seeing how this affects our clients spiritually and psychologically. So it starts with fear and prejudice. Let's look there. Now, you've heard the old saying before, I'm sure, that you don't have to have cancer to treat it. But let me tell you, if you do have cancer, you're a lot more empathic with your clients who do, and you really do understand a little bit better what they might be going through. You understand why they're worried and scared. Now, you might be saying to yourself, so who is this guy? He's clearly a clergy person. Is he pushing some agenda? All right, let me assure you that I'm not, and let me go into why. I was a therapist for 30 years before I became a priest. Yes, I did spend 6 years in the Roman Catholic Seminary before I ever went to undergraduate or graduate school, but I was asked to leave the Roman Catholic Seminary, and I'll tell you why. This was 1979, and I raised my hand at a meeting with our Cardinal Archbishop in Detroit, and I said at that time, why do we not have female priests and gay and lesbian priests? Well, you think that I set off a bomb in the room. I was asked to speak with my superiors afterwards. I was told that that comment was inappropriate. I thought it was just an innocent question myself. And I was told that maybe I didn't have a vocation for the priesthood and I should take a leave of absence. So they sent me packing for 1 year. I had to come back to the seminary, though, several times a week for prayers and mass and classes, but I couldn't live on the seminary grounds. So I did that for a year, and when I attempted to come back the following year, they asked me again, do you still have those beliefs? I said, yeah, you never answered the question the first time. Why don't we have female priests? Why don't we ordain gay and lesbian persons? So they basically said, well, I think, Brother Richard, it's time for you to go. So I left the Roman Catholic Church, but I didn't leave God. God wasn't the problem here. The problem was a bunch of narrow-minded men who were running that particular seminary. So it wasn't until actually 2014 that I decided that I wanted to finish my spiritual training. So I found a liberal old Catholic seminary, the old Catholic rite of the church. I knew that they were out there. I didn't realize that the Catholic Church actually has 23 rites. When you think of Catholic, you only think of the Roman Catholic Church. That's the largest rite. But there's 22 other rites out there that are much smaller. And one of them is the liberal rite, which has been around for about 150 years. Now I discovered that they have female clergy, that they have married clergy, that they have gay and lesbian clergy. That worked for me. So I studied with them. And interestingly enough, they're considered valid by the Vatican, a valid priesthood, valid sacraments. They just don't talk about that much, but it's true. Not that it matters that much, but who would have thought, right? Now, today I sort of combine my 35 years of experience as a psychologist and as a priest, and I use that training to treat people, many of whom have very deep spiritual scars. Many have scars from the past that I call religious trauma. They want to find a way to be spiritual again without the pain from their past, much like those who have been sexually abused. They want to find a way to be intimate again without triggering their trauma and their past. So you might be asking the next question, what does religion have to do with psychology? Well, okay. All right, so we're in business again. Okay, so let me just go here and see if I can click to the next one. There we go. All right, so there we are. So yes, historically, we were talking about how is psychology related to religion? Well, historically, philosophy is the mother of psychology. And I want you to think of religion as the baby daddy, okay? Because that's really where psychology came from. To fully understand psychology, you must have a good grasp of philosophy and of religion. Now, those are the roots for psychology. Now, I want to say up front that as a liberal Catholic priest, I get all the criticisms that people have of organized religion. But I want you to think about something here. The problem is that organized religion, the problem with organized religion is not that it's organized or that it's a religion. The problem here depends on how it's structured and how it's organized and what the core beliefs are. Now, some churches and some denominations are relatively progressive and liberal in their thinking and rather permissive in their style. Churches like the Episcopal Church, for example, the Evangelical Lutheran Church, and my branch of Catholicism are very accepting, very welcoming, and very affirming. The Roman Catholic Church and some conservative Lutheran synods, the Mormons, of course, the Anglican churches, these are what we call orthodox theologies, and they tend to be less accepting. Many fundamental theology churches like the Pentecostals, the Jehovah's Witness, the Southern Baptist Convention, these churches are not accepting typically at all. Now, it has a lot to do with how the particular denomination views the scriptures. If they take it literally, meaning that they believe that God and the Holy Spirit wrote the scriptures, then they interpret them fundamentally, meaning verbatim. Many scriptural scholars today believe that the scriptures are in fact made up of works that are a combination of historic fact. We have historic facts that, for example, the person Jesus did exist. We have historic facts from Roman history that the governor, Pilate of Judea at the time, did in fact crucify a man named Jesus. That is a historic fact. We also go with divine inspiration. What people felt at the time that they were writing the scriptures, that they felt God was compelling them to write. And then, of course, something called Gnostic mysticism. In other words, the belief at the time that God is inside of us, and it's our job to find God in us and express that. So we believe that the scriptures were made up of these three elements. In the more liberal churches or denominations like ours, we tend to view the scriptures as sort of a work of fiction based on a true story. So we see them as works written by men who have been inspired by God, but God personally didn't write the Bible. And we therefore believe that we shouldn't interpret them literally. Biblical scholars are aware that there are many inconsistencies in the Bible, and I'm sure you would also agree, and that many of the laws and directives that are in the Bible can no longer be followed. For example, ritual sacrifice that we saw in the Old Testament. Nobody would do that today. For this reason, we call them inspirational rather than essential or mandatory. And since Jesus himself did not write his words down, we rely on other people to tell his story. Okay, so I want you to think about it here that we tend to look at scriptures as simply a guide then, not as something that should be taken literally. Now, I want you to think about something here. We can see a similar example when well-meaning therapists only buy into one theory or one school of thought that they apply to everyone. Okay? They don't want to talk about any other approach. They only want to use the one belief system that they have for treating patients. When I did my master's internship, I did it at a Jewish psychiatric hospital in Detroit at the time that was very Freudian psychoanalytic at the time. You simply could not use any other method there. I tried my best to follow everything that they taught me. And when I was sitting in my supervisor's office one day, waiting for supervision, he had gone to a meeting and he said he would be right back. I looked around his office and I noticed in the corner of the room, he had a small table. And on the table, there was a vase of flowers, a picture of Sigmund Freud, and a small candle burning brightly in front of it. And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's a shrine. Now, when you think about it, if somebody believes that this is in fact how one should conduct themselves in therapy, that belief system becomes a big part of who they are. As a clinician, you would be hard-pressed to find very many theorists from our traditions who do not speak to the role of faith and spirituality in the development of personality. Freud viewed religion, as you know, as a neurotic attempt to deal with reality. But I ask you this question, what is reality? I viewed Freud's cocaine use as his attempt to deal with his reality, or what he thought it might have been. Freud spoke of the superego as a vestige of a moralistic parent or God representative within our personality. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious and the role of faith as a way of understanding the self. Viktor Frankl spoke to the meaning of life and religion as a way of coping in difficult times. The existentialists like Rollo May, Heidegger, and Kierkegaard also believe that it's the job of any good therapist to understand the four basic elements or dimensions of human existence: the physical, the social, the psychological, and the spiritual. In fact, being aware of the limitations of psychoanalysis and behaviorism, many existentialists believe that psychology must study the meaning of human existence, and spirituality provides a guide for this particular venture. Now, I don't mean to say here or suggest that spirituality and religion are always healthy for every person and apply in every situation. Sometimes they don't. Some people have a faith that is deeply ingrained in who they are, and it is a great source of strength and creativity for them. These people tend to have what we call an intrinsic theology, They're comfortable with God, they're comfortable with their faith. It defines who they are as a humanist who seeks to help others and bring about the betterment of society. Abraham Maslow called these people self-actualized optimists who experienced periodical mystical peak experiences, as he called it. Those who use religion as a tool to justify themselves and others, or who use it to control or judge others, have lost the message. They have more of what we call an extrinsic theology. They feel their spirituality only on the surface, and when challenged or stressed, they become defensive and critical of others. These are the people who have long used religion as a weapon against others who don't believe like they do. Now, if you're comfortable with yourself spiritually, there is no need to convert others or lord religion over anyone. In much the same way that a therapist would help a client mend a relationship with a past family member when the client chooses to do so or requests their help in doing so. I attempt to help the client mend the relationship to their faith, and when they feel that they're ready to do so and connect with it again. Now, in this age of COVID, we're faced with a dilemma that most of us have never had to deal with. And what that is a loss of normal. What does this mean to us? It means that we are grieving. In Eastern theology, we suffer because we refuse to acknowledge that things are always changing, and we ultimately have no control over this. Now, the Buddha once said, and I'll read it for you because it's an important quote from the Dharma. And he once said that everything is changeable. Everything appears and disappears. And there is no blissful peace until one passes beyond the agony of life and death. We try in vain to hold on to the past, to maintain our traditions, our rituals, because they give us momentary peace. We like to watch old movies because they remind us of a simpler time, don't they? The good old days, the time before we even existed in some cases, as if that was the time in our initial undisturbed peace before we had any realization that we even existed. How could we then have anxiety when we're not aware of our initial existence? We like to think of ourselves as reliant, strong, and adaptable. But in reality, we're sort of weak and pitiful in some ways. If we were hit with 3 new viruses in a row, let's say COVID-20, 21, and 22, we would crumble like a house of cards. Those with no faith would say, well, Mother Nature is done with us. We abuse the planet, maybe she's pissed, and we're toast. Those with faith understand that God's ways are not always our ways, and we don't always have to understand God's ways. God decides what the fate of the planet might be. People with faith are not afraid of death. They welcome it as an opportunity to experience everything their life was about, which is a journey to the final spiritual phase of our existence. Many of our patients struggle to find meaning in their lives. We all know that that's true. They struggle with their fear of death. They struggle with their fear of the unknown. People of faith struggle to be of service to God and others, and occasionally they get caught up in their own fear when they become aware of their own human frailty and their own limitations. Do faith and a spiritual belief help us? Well, research would suggest that it does, and everything from mental illness to physical health. Those who pray appear to heal faster, live longer, and report greater levels of happiness than those who have no spiritual or religious beliefs. Those who attend religious or spiritual services with some regularity appear to have less anxiety than the general population as a whole. In a now famous study conducted in 1993 at the University of Pennsylvania, research conducted MRI scans on some Franciscan nuns, some Catholic nuns, when they were meditating and praying, and they found that deep prayer stimulates many areas of the brain that are responsible for the sense of self. They concluded that prayer and meditation do in fact change the brain. People of faith often self-soothe by reminding themselves that they're not judged on the basis of status or money or power. How many of our clients tend to get caught up in power struggles with their coworkers, with their loved ones, even with their neighbors? How many of them define themselves by their titles or how much they make or even who they're dating? How many of them worry about losing all those things and what will become of them if they don't have these things? The big fear here is that they'll become irrelevant and obscure, perhaps forgotten, even dismissed. Spiritual persons and a person of faith takes comfort in his or her existence and humbly waits for the next phase of life. It's not a neurotic certainty, nor an entitled expectation. It is the calm that comes from the need to be aware of something greater than yourself and the truly limited allure that this physical world has to offer. In other words, your beautiful car will not stay that way for very long. You will age, your beauty will fade, those you love will get sick, and they will die, because everyone dies. No one gets to live forever, but not everyone ceases to exist, and that's what faith tells us. Spiritual people feel connected to something greater than themselves, something outside of this mere earthly existence. They're part of a greater universe, and they feel drawn to be a part of it. Many people have reported near-death experiences, and the vast majority of them report that they were pleasant. It took away all of their fear of death, and they felt decidedly more spiritual afterwards. Many felt the presence of a being that they called God, if they believe in God, and those who had no previous religious experience simply called it a force of light or energy. Love is a universal energy we have been given, and we do use it to help others. Most therapists can't really tell you why they become a therapist. So I pose that question to you now. Why are you a therapist? Some may say that a therapist once helped them, so they wanted to become a therapist. That the money isn't too bad, so that's why you became a therapist. It has a certain amount of status, and therefore you became a therapist. Or you simply wanted to help others. Why do you want to help others? I think I know why. Because you love them. The spirit of love is within you, but many of you don't really know its name. You may be spiritually dead, as the Buddha once said. You are simply not awake, not aware of it. Love is what binds all humans together, and it's what allows us to weather these difficult times that we see in this pandemic when we feel so out of control. Sure, exercise helps. I'm sure we've heard a lot of that, right? Eating well is also a good idea. Yeah, we can go with that one too. And sure, it's a good idea to structure your day, especially when you're sheltering at home. And of course, don't forget to clean out that sock drawer. But nothing really helps a person crawl out from under their deepest despair more than helping others. It is in finding your love source that we find the deep spiritual part of ourselves that allows us to feel the pain of another person, carry it with us for a while, as we do in therapy, and then help them process it. Our job is not to eliminate it. Our job is to help them process it. It is not ours to take. It is not ours to take from them. This is what we should do as therapists. We help them find love. We help them find hope. We help them find purpose. Suffering often gives us meaning. And it's at times like these when we suffer that we search for meaning, and in turn, we find faith. The great mystics of our time, like St. Francis, St. Teresa, St. Mother Teresa, and of course, Thomas Merton, just to name a few, have known for years what we can only imagine. What it must be like to have a deep spiritual experience that removes all doubt and all fear. It is what the Eastern mystics and people of Zen have spoke about for centuries, to live in the moment and not be plagued by the trauma or depression of our past or all the anxieties we have about the future uncertainties. We cannot anticipate the future any more than we knew a year ago, that COVID would kill thousands of us, but yet it did, and it will continue to do so. And we know nothing about what might happen next year. We can only search deep inside of ourselves and share ourselves with those we touch. We listen as therapists, we connect, we acknowledge, and we encourage. Ours is not to criticize or to judge. We heal through allowing the person's own abilities to find true meaning in their lives and what the universe might have in store for them. If it is their spiritual beliefs, then we should allow them. Allow them to use them as a strength and as a healthy means for defining who they are, why they're here, and perhaps where they're going. There is a reason that most therapists consider themselves humanists, because they want to be of help to other people. As I mentioned earlier, I'm aware that many therapists claim to be agnostic or even atheists. But then, how would they be of help to the person of faith, or even the person with spiritual or existential questions? Well, I believe they still can be, but they must be willing to understand the role of faith in treatment and how the
Father C.
person
Nicola,
functions.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't want to run into our next topic, and we're right at the end. It's such a rich topic, and I think that we'll have some people that want to go to the Q&A room with you. But we're at that time where we need to move it along. I apologize.
All right,
If
no problem.
if you would like to go to the Q&A with Father C. Nicola, just send me a chat or give me a yes or hands up or something in the column, and we'll get that going. And then I'm going to turn it over to Christine and Allie that is going to introduce